In this next phase, we're going to be discussing project execution, which is where we do the work of the project. So in the planning phase, we went through each of the different knowledge areas and made sure that we had a plan in place for how we were going to approach the project work. And now it's time to get down to business. Just a quick pre conversation. Most often projects officially kick off at this phase. And so it is customary or usual for the project manager, the project sponsor, to take the time to schedule a project kickoff meeting. Traditionally, that kickoff meeting will include not just the project team members that are working on the project, but may also include a much wider group of people, including different stakeholders or different members of the organization or the community that we want to make sure are informed about the work that we're undertaking. And that kickoff meeting might go through essentially the high level plan that's documented on the charter. Here are the key milestones. Here's the rationale, that type of stuff. And that is one way to officially kick off that project to make sure that everyone has the same information and knows exactly what's going to be happening. So let's dive in to what project execution really looks like. So the first component of the project execution process is directing and managing the project work. And so in this section or in this task area, or this process step, I should call it, is where you as the project manager are going to disseminate the various scope requirements and technical specifications for the project to the project team, making sure that everyone on the project knows exactly what their assignments are and what the expectations are for those assignments. Traditionally, again, you'd start off with a kickoff and then you would schedule routine project coordination meetings. And as we discussed in the planning section around communication management, planning for communication management, this is largely based on the intensity, the scope, and the timeline for your project. And so these might be meetings that happen once a week. They might be every 2 weeks. They might be once a month. They might be once a quarter. And then during periods of high intensity in the project, they could be multiple times a week or even multiple times a day. And then configuring who needs to be in what meeting and the purpose of each meeting. All of those things go into the work of implementing the project. While you're doing that, and while you're facilitating those meetings, and while you're discussing and connecting with the project team members and stakeholders and kind of tracking all of the work, you want to make sure that you are continuously updating your project documentation. So this does include updating the activities list, updating the project schedule, updating the stakeholders list. If there are new things that need to be added to the budget, then you're going to update your costs. All of those different things are going to help you stay on track of what's going on throughout your project. And again, as we've said in the planning process, 90% of the project is about communication. And this is the part where that component really comes to life, where we are going to communicate, communicate, communicate. And when we think that we've communicated, we got to communicate again. I once had a client that was a very large, I think it's a Fortune 50 company, and they had signs all around one of their offices that said, the greatest error in communication is assuming that it happened. And in project management, we definitely learn to appreciate that to make sure that every single member of the project team stays up to date. And that is a large part of directing and managing the project work. And so another component in this project execution phase is making sure that we're managing quality. So in planning, we identified how we were going to do this, but now it's time to do the work. And ultimately, as those deliverables are being created and as they're being submitted to the team, we want to make sure that we're implementing our quality assurance activities. And so this does include reviewing deliverables against their requirements. Again, especially if we're talking about verification indicators or regulatory requirements or policy requirements, we want to make sure are incorporated. We want to compare those two things, right? Sometimes that's the job of the project manager. Other times that might be assigned to one of the subject matter experts that's on your team that really understands those requirements and is qualified to make that determination. Personally, I do not touch medical things. So if we're writing medical guidelines or practice guidelines or even policies and procedures, I might draft it based off of best practices or something I can find on the internet, but I am absolutely not going to be the person to sign off on that. And so I always make sure that the medical director or an RN or someone who's more qualified than I am to execute or approve those types of things. And as you can see on the slide, we're going to be doing all of our quality assurance activities. So doing those audits, doing those facility walkthroughs. And this last component is about user acceptance testing. User acceptance testing is when you engage the end user of whatever process or product that you're developing and get their feedback on it and make sure that they're comfortable with it. So often what I encounter when doing programmatic things in the healthcare or human services field is I might write a policy and procedure, maybe update some forms in an electronic health record or case management system. But at the end of the day, I need that case manager or that member services rep or that customer service contact center person to actually test out and make sure that what we've built makes sense and that it works for them. And so user acceptance testing is not just having kind of the executive level folks or the management level folks implement or engage with the deliverables, but also pushing it all the way through to the front line, the end user, and having them try it out. This also might include engaging patients or clients that you're working with to get their feedback on what it is that you're developing. And so, doing customer-driven processes is definitely something that will help your project be far more successful and applicable in the day-to-day life. During this process, as we discussed, we're going to go through and acquire the resources that we either identified through the resource management process. And there's another step in here that's going to address procurements after this. So in the acquiring resources step, we're going to actually engage the team members that are going to be a part of the team. That could be simply inviting them in the first meeting. We don't need to overthink this, right? But the concept is that we're going to officially allocate those resources, those people, that equipment, those finances, whatever it might be, to the project so that they become available when the project needs them to be available. And so again, as we discussed in our planning phase, this might be when you actually get online and place that office supply order to make sure that you have everything that you need for your project. Throughout the execution phase, we're going to continuously manage our communication. Communication, of course, as we discussed, includes emails, meeting minutes, coordination meetings, maybe an intranet site. Even a lot of project management softwares now have different chat features, and you can tag people and all of that. And so this is the time where it's time to put that plan to work. And so if you choose to use a project management software or have a shared site of some form, whether it's even Microsoft SharePoint or another intranet type of platform, shared drives, this is when you build those out. This is also when you are facilitating those team meetings, and you really will learn, if there are team members that work remotely or team members that are only in the offices on certain days. Again, maybe in-person only meetings might not be sufficient. Maybe it's time to add that conference line or that video conferencing component to your meetings, making sure that those meeting minutes are being documented and that they're being organized and stored somewhere that everyone has access to. And if for whatever reason someone's not able to attend that meeting, you might want to do a follow-up call with them or a one-on-one touch base just to make sure that they know everything that they need to know. Again, 90% of project management boils down to communication. And so we strongly encourage to just continually invest, go back to the well, go back to the drawing board. Are we doing good enough? Is this communication flowing smoothly enough for everyone? And finally, we want to make sure that our business owners, the different department leaders or individuals that are on the project team that are assigned to different work, that they are routinely providing updates on the status of their work. So based off of your personal style or the way that your project management plan, your policies and procedures are written, this might be a matter of individuals going in and updating the project status and risks and adding comments, to the activities list, or if you have a risk log that you use, or whatever it is. Some folks like to delegate that or give people access to kind of self-manage their current status. Other project managers and companies want team members to submit a summary report at the end of the week or a template of some form. We do have a couple of options available for you in our tools and templates library. that we have used, and some of our largest clients, including Fortune 150 companies, used to do routine project status updates. Those are typically used and submitted to executive team level or executive team members, I should say, and or the project sponsor, so that they know exactly where the project stands at all times. Another area that we're going to deploy or implement in the project execution phase is we're going to implement all of our risk responses. Now, in the planning phase, we identify all the potential things that could go wrong. Not all those things are going to go wrong, I hope. And there might be some new things that you didn't plan for that might go wrong. Again, projects are very dynamic. They can be very exciting, which is what I love about working in them. And so as those risks are coming up, this is when you go to that risk management plan and say, how did we say we were going to respond to this? So you review that risk response plan, you implement the risk response plan, but very importantly and critically, you want to monitor it and make sure that that plan is working. In the next phase of project management, we're going to talk about monitoring and controlling, but these things are such in lockstep. You could not or should not implement a risk response and then just set it and forget it. This is when you want to pay attention, make those follow-up, do those warm handoffs, close loop referrals, whatever it is, to make sure that you're closing the loop on whether or not that risk was actually resolved. Because the last thing you want is to think that the problem is resolved and then not be resolved. And so if your risk response isn't sufficient or doesn't fully take care of the matter, then you want to iterate, go back to the drawing board. Okay, so we got 50% of the risk resolved, but we still need to come up with strategies and solutions for the other 50%, right? And of course, you'll update kind of your risk management plan with the additional strategies, and then, again, continue to monitor to make sure that the new strategies are also helping address the concerns that were presented. The next thing that we're going to be focusing on in the project execution phase is conducting those procurements. Now, in the planning phase, we talked about how some procurements are super easy. It's a matter of, filling up a shopping cart in an online store. And assuming, you might have a company credit card or the ability to, get those things paid for, this can take a matter of seconds, if not or minutes, to get that procurement solidified. But if you do need to go through the longer process of creating a request for proposal and writing out a scope of work and the terms and conditions and creating a budget and defining that evaluation criteria, this would, and should be, several days, weeks, maybe even a month's worth of work, depending on what you're working on, again, the scale of it. And so you want to develop that response or that procurement. You're going to go ahead and post it and send it out to all your vendors, let people know that it's available and that it's on the street. You're going to give them time to respond, which again can really impact and drive some of your project timelines, especially if it's a longer response. It could take several weeks, months for that response to be completed and submitted back to you. Once you get them in, you need to identify, or you're going to pull in the folks that you previously identified to evaluate them, give them the audit checklist and the tools, the evaluation criteria to review each of those responses, and then you're going to actually award those vendors. So again, conducting procurements can be real fast, or it might be something that is a whole side project or sub-project that you want to track over time and make sure that it is keeping your overall project on schedule. Another component, and the final component we're going to discuss today in project execution, is managing that stakeholder engagement. And so in the project initiation phase, we identified who those stakeholders were. In project planning phase, we did an analysis to figure out what their level of interest is, what their level of power is, all those things. So we could really kind of identify who we need to pay attention to. We mapped them out and assigned individuals to take the lead, kind of engaging those individuals, and now it's time to do that work. And so just some lessons learned from my experience is making sure that we are proactively communicating with each of those individuals. Sometimes, again, that can just be via email. That can just be, by inviting them to a monthly update call or open house, or maybe, it's just the kickoff that they want to participate in. But in the planning phase, you should be identifying kind of how they want to be communicated with. and their communication channels and frequencies, as we discussed in the communication planning process. And so now's when you do that work. The goal here is to build and strengthen those relationships. Stakeholders, again, they can be for you or against you. And so if they are against you, they might be folks that we try to bring them over to the other side and bring them in to support the project by understanding their needs a little bit more and maybe revising parts of the project to make sure that it can meet their needs. And if they're for you, you want to continue to, feed them positive information and the successes. You also want to make sure that as those deliverables are coming in, that if it's relevant to their work, or to their role or to their interest, that you're engaging them as appropriate. This is, again, it can be a political process, both conceptually as well as formally, because in Health and Human Services, we are often government funded, and there are oftentimes state and federal policymakers that are very interested in the work that we're doing. And so depending on what's appropriate, work with your project sponsor, your compliance team, if you have a lobbyist or government affairs person, engage them in this process so that you can make sure you're funneling the right information out. And then based on feedback that you're getting and based on their satisfaction, that is when we would again kind of revise our stakeholder management plan. That might also include revising our communication strategy. If someone's like, stop calling me, you're annoying me, it's time to pull it back. Or if they're like, why have I never heard from you? Then you want to update that communication plan a little bit to make sure that they're getting the right information so that they can continue to support their goals. So that has been project execution. I know it's very broad, this review for today, but essentially it's all about doing the project work. And 90% of that work for us project managers is going to be communicating the progress and what's going on, touching base with all of our project team members and making sure that everything continues to move forward. And when it doesn't, that we're implementing those risk responses and taking pause to make sure that we can get this project back on track.